Hello folks, my name is Scott Bly with Soul Reflections. I actually own two different companies. One operates out of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. The other one operates just north of Dallas up by the Lake TexOma region. The one company that I operate in Dallas is called DallasPaintCorrection.com. The other company that I own that's up by Lake TexOma is called TexOmaAutoDetailing.com as well. This video, and please forgive me, I want to start off by saying I don't have a cameraman, I don't have a script, this isn't a large production or a studio house. I basically wanted to create a video explaining exactly what paint correction is, how it's performed, and why I would choose to use paint correction to remove some of the scratches from my paint. Now, forgive me if the lighting's a little bit off. I'll tweak that during the editing, but basically the simple hopefully will be rather short. And the reason why I say that is paint correction is a rather extensive topic. It can be a rather long conversation to have, but for the purpose of this video, I kind of want to keep it short. I want to be able to give you the key points, or the cliff notes if you will, so that you become more informed and more educated as a consumer and understand what paint correction actually is and the process of paint correction. Now, what I have in front of me is a 2005 or 2006, I believe it's a 2005 Lincoln Navigator. And this particular Navigator has what typically most of you are going to have on your car is what we call OEM paint. It's a base coat, clear coat type of finish. And what that actually means is, as I touch this bumper, this is the substrate or the body panel. This part of the car actually happens to be a substrate made out of plastic. But the hood is a form of sheet metal. Now that sheet metal can come in different forms. It can be sheet metal, it can be aluminum, it can be fiberglass, it can be some type of carbon fiber. This substrate really isn't all that relevant for this particular conversation of paint correction, but I basically wanted to explain what paint correction actually is. I actually had a customer not too long ago look at me and say, "It sounds like my car has done something naughty, like you have to correct it." And I had to laugh because paint correction does actually sound that way, like something naughty has happened to the paint and it needs to be corrected. And in a simplified answer to that, that is somewhat true. Some of you may notice that after you wash your car or you lay a layer of wax or paint sealant on the vehicle, if you step back about 3 to 5 feet from the vehicle and your car happens to be in direct sunlight, you may notice some of these defects in the paint, and they can get rather annoying and a little aggravating, and that's typically when people will call me. The defects that you can find in the paint, the terms for these defects are rather endless. They can be what they call in my industry swirl marks, or buffer trails, or holograms, or spider webbing, because when you look at these defects in direct sunlight, they have this pattern or this configuration of these scratches looking like they're in a circular pattern, or they look like a spider web, if you will, all over the paint. And the process of paint correction simply is removing a layer of the clear coat, which hopefully those defects that are bothering you are lying within the clear coat, and then you can remove them permanently. And when you do that through what we call paint correction. Now, I use the word permanently, and I used the layer of the clear coat in which those defects lie kind of purposely, because there are some defects within the paint that cannot be removed within 100%. There are certain defects that actually go below the clear coat and can actually affect the base coat. So if we look at this Lincoln Navigator and we look at its paint, what you basically have is a substrate, and during the manufacturing process, the manufacturer will apply typically 3 different types of layers on the substrate. The first layer typically is the primer. The second layer is the base coat. Now the base coat is the paint or the layer of paint that gives your car color. In this particular instance, we have this Navigator here and it's red. So the base coat is a red base coat. It's a red paint. Then what we have is a layer over the base coat, which is the clear coat. Now the clear coat is typically where a lot of these imperfections lie, whether they be fine scratches, swirl marks, or spider webbings, or holograms. There's endless terms for all these different types of defects, but basically what they are is scratches that seem to bother all of us when we look at our car in direct sunlight. So we want to be able to remove a very small layer of clear coat, and we want to discuss what clear coat actually is in this video as well. What clear coat is it happens to be the last layer of paint or protection, if you will, that's applied to the vehicle. This clear coat is actually extremely thin. If you actually have used a Post-it note, and I'll assume most of you who are watching this video have used a Post-it note, whether you simply put it on your refrigerator to have a simple little note or reminder to yourself, or you use it at work and you stick it all over your computer in front of you or on your desk to remind you of a task that you have to perform. If you actually took that Post-it note, one single sheet of that Post-it note, and squeezed it between your fingers, the clear coat that is on your car is actually thinner than a Post-it note. So when we're looking at these defects, hopefully they reside on the surface or just below the surface of the clear coat, so that they can be completely removed during the paint correction process. Now, what we typically do in paint correction is we use a certain type of tool, a certain type of pad, and a certain type of compound to be able to cut, or what I like to call level, the clear coat. Now, this particular tool I have in front of me is a dual action polisher. The name would suggest that it actually has two functions, and in fact that's true. The dual action polisher is doing something quite effective. It's actually mimicking your hand as if you were going to apply some type of polish or wax to the car. We typically wax on, wax off, and what we're doing is we're moving our hand in a circular pattern, but we're also oscillating our hand as well. So if you look at the face of this pad that's attached to the DA polisher, of course the pad turns and it has a circumference to the pad, but the dual action part is not only does the pad rotate, there's also little circular patterns that are created within the circumference of the pad, and that's why it's called a dual action polisher. And this particular dual action polisher I have in front of me that I have on my lap has what we call a medium cut correcting pad or a polishing pad. Now I know in the video you guys can't feel this pad, but I'll try to explain what I'm feeling when I drag my fingers across this pad. First of all, this pad is rather thick. It's also stiff and dense, but if you ran your fingers across it, it also has some bite to it. It has a little bit of a coarse feel to it, and that's important when we're removing a layer of the clear coat. Now, in combination of the right type of pad and the right type of compound, when we apply the compound to the pad and then run it across the surface of the clear coat, what we're doing is actually cutting or scooping a very small thin layer of clear coat where those imperfections lie, and we're removing that layer of clear coat. The other thing that we want to try to remember and keep in mind when it comes to the clear coat on the car, not only have we already covered that it's awfully thin, it's thinner than a Post-it note, but a lot of my customers will ask me, well, what does the clear coat actually do for the vehicle? Well, what the clear coat is doing, it's a form of protection, if you will. It's a thin layer of protection, and what it does is protect the base coat, which gives the car its color. It protects the base coat from UVA and UVB light. Now, typically, if you look at clear coat, or you have some basic knowledge of how thin clear coat is, it's about 2 mils thick. It's not awfully thick. There's not a lot of it on the car. And one of the things that it does, as I explained, it protects the base coat from UVA and UVB light. The clear coat itself, let's say you bought a car in 2015, by the time you get to 2020, 5 years later, you're going to lose about 50% of the clear coat's ability to be able to block UVA and UVB light. Now, if we go another 5 years from there, we're talking about 2025 now, you've lost 75% of the clear coat's ability to block UVA and UVB light. I bring this up, and I bring this up for a reason. When we're doing some type of clear coat removal, removing defects from the paint, we want to have a level of respect and keep that clear coat intact to the best of our ability. Yes, we want to remove the imperfections from the paint, but we don't want to go completely too deep where we compromise the clear coat's integrity. One of the things as a professional detailer that I don't want to do is remove too much of that clear coat off the vehicle in the hopes of removing all of the defects from the car, and then my customer calls me up a year later and goes, "Scott, something's wrong with my car, it's starting to look hazy, it looks oxidized, the clear coat looks like it's starting to fall apart." That's the last thing we want to do. And I bring this point up for a reason, is because in my industry there are plenty of people who offer paint correction, and unfortunately there's a lot that offer that service, and they're willing, at the sake of making $1, of throwing their customer or throwing the car under the bus, if you will, and actually leaving the customer kind of hanging out there by a thin thread, and compromising the clear coat's ability to block UVA and UVB light. And this is just something that I would not be willing to do. I have a reputation that I have to keep intact, so that's important to me as well. But basically, we would use a dual action polisher. There's also another tool that you can use to remove defects from paint, and that's called a rotary polisher. Now, a rotary polisher really needs to be in the hands of a professional, because they're rather aggressive, and I don't mean that in a negative way. In fact, a rotary buffer can be incredibly effective in some cases from getting from point A to point B rather quickly, more quickly than using a dual action polisher. But you have to have some experience, you have to have some knowledge, you have to have some experience behind the wheel of the rotary buffer, because there are certain body lines, certain curves or edges that can become incredibly dangerous if you happen to be using a rotary buffer over those areas of the car. What can happen is you can blow through clear coat, or you can burn through clear coat. That's just something that I don't want to do as a professional, and I'm sure as a consumer you don't want that done to your car as well. So basically, a dual action polisher is incredibly effective at being able to remove those defects from the paint and remove a very thin layer of clear coat off the vehicle. And again, we do that with the use of a dual action polisher, an appropriate pad that's matched to an appropriate compound based on the level of expectations or the amount of defects we want to remove from the paint. Now, if you go to my website, which is either DallasPaintCorrection.com or TexOmaAutoDetailing.com, on both of those sites I have a little link to my paint correction services. I offer 4 different types of paint correction. That's a little bit unique in this industry. Most of the time, a paint correction specialist or a auto detailer is going to offer 2 types of paint corrections. They call them a 1-step or they call them a 2-step. Basically, a 1-step, as it implies, is a 1-step process all the way around the vehicle, where you would use a less aggressive pad, a less aggressive compound to remove, say, 30 to 50% of the defects from the paint, and you would do that once all the way around the car. Or if you want to remove more defects, or the car requires more defects need to be removed, then you would go to a 2-step, which is using a more aggressive pad, a more aggressive compound. You would do that once completely around the vehicle, and then you would follow up by changing your pad to a softer, more gentle finishing pad that we call it in the industry, and combining that with a finish polish, and you would do that all the way around the vehicle as well. But my experience, I have learned that not all cars require a true 1-step or a true 2-step, and this could be for various different reasons. One, the customer may not have that level of expectations, they don't want to remove, or the car doesn't have that many defects, but they want to restore shine and gloss. So if you look at my website, I offer 4 different levels of paint correction based on your level of expectations and based on your budget. As a professional detailer, I want to make my services available to everyone. And I'm not naive to the fact that a 2-step paint correction is rather expensive, especially if we're talking about a large vehicle like this Lincoln Navigator. Going around this car twice with a true 2-step paint correction can be rather expensive. And some people just don't require it, or they don't want that type of service. So if you look at my paint correction prices, you can pick the service that meets your level of expectations and your budget. So basically, to kind of wrap up this video, and I apologize if it's been a little bit too long, the paint correction process of that conversation can be rather lengthy. But simply put, the paint correction process is the removal of certain types of defects that lie or reside within your clear coat. How we use or how we choose to do paint correction determines what type of tool you're going to use, what type of pad you're going to use, and what type of compound or polish you're going to use during that process of paint correction all the way around the car. Now the why is kind of simple. I have a lot of customers that may wash their car on a Sunday afternoon, they step back, they look at their car, and it just completely drives them nuts. They have these imperfections or these scratches all over the paint, and they want to remove them. Now, I want to thank you for being able to sit through this video. Hopefully it wasn't all that long. I hope I've been able to hit some of the key points about how thin the clear coat actually is, what the clear coat actually does, how to remove defects from the clear coat, and hopefully that's answered some of your questions for you. Now, if you go to any of my websites have my phone number on it. I want to leave myself completely open to anybody who may have some questions, whether they want to hire me to do a paint correction process on their vehicle. You're always welcome to give me a call. If there were certain questions or aspects of paint correction, which I'm sure there are many that were not covered in this video, please feel free to ask me any questions that you want. I'll be completely transparent and give you all the information that you need that goes into the actual process of paint correction. I also want to say that if you're a do-it-yourselfer or you're a car enthusiast and you want to be able to do this on your own car, you're more than, excuse me, what is the word I'm looking for? I'm completely open to any type of phone call, even if you're a do-it-yourselfer and you want some guidance for what type of polisher scotch should I get, what type of compound should I get, what type of pad should I use on my car. I'm always available for those types of conversations as well. So bear with me, I'm awfully busy sometimes, but if you leave me a message, if you don't get me on the first call, leave me a message, I'll get back to you in an appropriate amount of time and I'll answer those questions for you. Again, I appreciate it. I'm Scott with Soul Reflections. I own a company in Dallas called DallasPaintCorrection.com, and I own a company north of Dallas called TexOmaAutoDetailing.com. I'll leave the links down below. Also, if you have any comments and you want to leave those comments down below this video, feel free to leave the comments. I try to review all those comments and get back to the individuals and answer those questions. And again, I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to sit through this small little video on what paint correction actually is. I appreciate it. Take care. And until the next time, be safe.